Good morning, YouTube pipe smokers. Prairie Piper here. Today's topic is going to be on cellaring tobacco. A little bit on why people do it, why you should do it, might want to do it, um, and we'll go from there. So I've been smoking a pipe for 25 years. Really only started cellaring maybe 5, 6 years ago. When I first got into pipe smoking, in and around the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, nobody cellared tobacco. Maybe like the one or two out of 100 people, but generally speaking, nobody was cellaring tobacco back in the early 2000s. In fact, I don't think anybody began cellaring tobacco hardcore until the last 8 to 10 years, maybe. And that essentially occurred with the advent of the internet and pipe forms. And I think with the availability and the price point of tobacco, going in a negative way. So, but we'll touch on that. So let's get into it. Why do you cellar tobacco? Why might you want to cellar tobacco? I think there's three primary reasons people do it: price point, availability, and taste. So price, obviously tobacco is not going to be getting any cheaper. It's cheaper today, right now, than it will be next Saturday or the one after that or next year, right? Usually there is anywhere from 50 or 75 cents to a buck or two put on your tobacco every 12 months. So it's going to save you money long term if you can start cellaring and stocking up on it. The second reason is availability. So we lost Sutliff and Mac Baren this year. A few years ago was McClellan's. Around that same time too, shortly after, I think McClellan's was Dunhill, although I know Peterson through STG brought some of the blends back. But if you've got a favorite tobacco blend, um, you want to make sure that you have it for the next 10 to 15 years to smoke. You got to cellar it. Otherwise, in this hobby of ours, unfortunately, it's just going to get smaller, at least from the tobacco standpoint. So if you want those tobaccos to be around, if you want to smoke them, you got to cellar them, stock up on them. And the third reason why people cellar tobacco is taste. So over time, the tobacco gets sweeter, it gets fuller, it gets richer. The edges on rough blends get smoothed out. The flavors kind of meld into each other and combine and into some wonderful flavors. Certain blends really do well with age on them. It's kind of like a chili or a stew. I use this analogy often, where the chili and the stew are always better the next day, right? When they've had a chance to sit on the stove for a couple hours to cool off, and then you put it in the fridge, and the next day, right, maybe for lunch or for dinner, it just tastes way better, right? When all those, the onions, the garlic, the meats, the tomatoes, whatever, has just had a chance to sort of trade flavors with one another, right? And that's essentially the same thing that's happening in your tobacco as well. I'm just going to tilt this up a little bit more here. So that's essentially what's happening with your tobacco, right? Tobacco is an organic substance, so it ages well, just like wine does. Now, which tobaccos do you want to cellar? I'm not going to go into a deep dive here. You can't really cellar aromatic tobaccos. The alcohol that's used in it dissipates after a number of years, and it loses taste. So most people don't cellar aromatics. The blends, the leaf that you generally want to make sure that you've got in the blend is you need Virginias and you need Perique, generally speaking, because that's where the sugar is, and the sugar is what triggers the fermentation, right? To get all those flavors mingling in together. So, um, generally you're not going to age like a Latakia or dark fired or a Burley. It's usually going to have Virginia and Perique in it in order to successfully sort of bring those flavors together. Okay, got my black cup of coffee ready for the pipe after this. So, how do you store tobacco? Um, there's a few different ways. The two most popular ways are going to be your tins, just leaving it in the tin, or jars. Now, you've got the round tins. you have the square tins, and then you got the rectangular tins. You know, this is a square tin from Samuel Gawith. Now, I honestly don't know what's better, if it's the square or the round tin, but a lot of people have said over the years the round tins seem to hold the keep hold their what am I trying to say here? The round tins seem to seal better, keep their seal better over time. I will say one thing, and I'm surprised a lot of people haven't pointed this out, at least some of the reviews that I've looked at. Um, I would not the new tins that the Samuel Gawith comes in, and this is from the company themselves. Samuel Gawith, when they put it in the tins, um, they don't make tobacco to age. Um, that's from a rep that was on one of the Pipes magazine forums. You can probably search it up. They make the tobacco to be smoked today, tomorrow, maybe next month, whatever. It's not for cellaring. I don't really trust these Sam Gawith tins anymore. Older tins you could tell were vacuum sealed because they were flat, right? You could see that something was sucking the tin in. The new ones I wouldn't trust at all. They don't look like they're vacuum sealed. I actually don't think that they are. And like I said, reading on one of the forums, one of the reps actually came in and said, "We don't make tobacco to sell it for 10 years later. Our tobacco is made to be smoked today or in the near future." So keep that in mind. You're going to want to probably put Sam Gawith into a jar right away. So, um, some of the benefits for using tins, right? Tins can keep your value, right? So, you know, if you want to sell this or trade it down the road 2 or 3 years, it's going to be more valuable as a trade if it's in the tin and it's sealed rather than if it's in a jar or a bag. So it keeps the resale value. Tins are also cheaper. Keeping it in the tin is also cheaper, and it saves space, right? I mean, anytime you crack open a tin, you're going to need a jar. That costs money, and it takes up a little bit more space. And as I noted, the you know, I don't know for a fact. I've had square tins for 10 years that have seemed to kept their integrity, just the same as the round tins. But apparently, a lot of people say the round tins are the better way to go. Um, some people, on principle, crack open their square tins and put them in jars right away. So what's beneficial from a jar? Here's the jars here. Here's these mason jars. What's this? We got the Haunted Bookshop. I've smoked half of it. This is the um, a larger mason jar. Here's the smaller one. This is Mac Baron Bold Kentucky. So just, you know, depending on how much you want to sell her, right? Here's the big one. Here's the small one. Kind of just up to you. But what's the benefit of these? These are probably the best way to sell her tobacco, bar none. They're sealed. They're not vacuum sealed, but they're sealed. You can have tobacco in here for 10 years, 15, 20 years. You don't have to boil it like with the vegetable shit and all that. Like you just, you know, if you get the jars, you know, put them through the dishwasher if you want. Let them dry out or not. You don't even have to put them through dishwasher. Just throw your tobacco straight in here. They're ready to go. This keeps the keeps them airtight. So they are the best way to go for cellaring tobacco. Um, Not much more to say. They take up a little bit more room, but they're the best method. So, other options. Some people, um, some people will put their tobacco in mylar bags. Some people even they'll take a tin and they'll put it in a mylar bag and they'll seal the bag. They'll still seal the tin itself, kind of like you got these food saver machines where you can wrap beef jerky, but rather than wrapping a beef jerky or some sausage you made, you put your tin of tobacco in there in a bag and it vacuum seals the bag. That works too. I've seen some guys put electrical tape all the way around the outside. You're essentially just forming a seal. I don't do any of that. I don't do the mylar bags. I don't do the electrical tape. Um, the plastic pouches. I've never had an issue with the tins myself. So I have some in tins. I have bulk stuff in jars. So really up to you. But you're going to want to make sure that you label it. Obviously put what's in it, and you're going to want to put the date on it too, so you know how long it's been in there. I made notes here because I wanted to make sure that I was a little bit more thorough on this rather than just shooting from the hip. So, third thing we'll talk about in cellaring is, where do you want to store your tobacco? You want to keep it in a dark, dry area, away from light in general, but particularly sunlight. You know, um, don't get a Tupperware container and stick it out in the living room where the sun's going to shine in every day. Um, you also want to keep it in a neutral area of the house, um, away from outside walls, especially if you're in cold climates, in the prairies like we are, in the Midwest United States, right? There's a lot of cold air, right? If you're in cold climates, you know this. The outside walls are the coldest part of the house. I don't recommend keeping your tobacco in a closet that's on an outside wall. Keep it in a closet somewhere on an inside wall. It's going to be more of a neutral temperature there. You're also going to want to keep it away from cold air vents or heat vents, right? You don't want hot air. You don't want to put it into an area of the house where it's going to be blowing cold air in the summer, or hot air in the winter, right? Where it's changing temperatures rapidly on a daily basis with warm air or cold air. So essentially, what you're looking for is a place dry, away from the sunlight, generally away from sun or a light in general, and an area in which the temperature is not going to fluctuate. Um, I wouldn't recommend keeping it in a if you got an older house, I probably wouldn't recommend keeping it in the basement. Older houses tend to be much more moist and wet in the basement, but again, that might work for you. And if that does, you know your house better than I do. But just those are some of the things to look out for. So um, I want to have a pipe now. So what we'll do is I'll pause this video. We'll go outside, and I'll give you my final thoughts on what I've learned over the last 6-7 years of cellaring tobacco. Okay, we'll meet you out there soon. Okay, I'm back here out in the garage. The bowl fired up. Old Joe Krantz. Great stuff. So, just to wrap this up, my final thoughts, a couple things you should know um, about cellaring. If you can get this, what's called plume, even after 6 months. So whether it's 6 months or 6 years, because of the sugars in the tobacco, you get what's called a plume. It's kind of like a white sugary substance that forms on the tobacco with age. Although, like I said, you can get plume in up to 6 months or a year, sometimes even less. It typically comes more with age. I wish I had somebody show you. I don't. Um, but it just basically looks like powdered sugar. Now, this always comes up. I'm sure you've probably seen it on forums. Like, is it plume, like from age, or is it mold? Um, I've never had tobacco that's molded. It's not that common, again, unless you're storing your tobacco somewhere where there's just a lot of moisture. So I'm not an expert on this. I can't really speak to it, but I've seen enough of it, I think, to know if it's mold, you're gonna know it. Like you're gonna know it's mold. Mold generally smells, and it's really kind of a discolored type. Um, it's really a discolored color, for lack of better words. So I think you're gonna know if it's mold. A lot of guys just say, hey, listen, like if it doesn't really smell that bad, doesn't look that bad, and you're unsure if it's plume or mold, and you smoke it, that's the ultimate test. If it tastes like shit, throw it out. If it seems okay and you live to tell another tale, you live to fight another day, yeah, even if it is mold, maybe it's okay. Now, I'm not a doctor, so don't take that to the bank. But usually the taste test will I'm sure let you know. The other thing is longer is not always better. Um, it all kind of depends on your taste profile, right? Some guys might like an aged tin, a Latakia, 5 years. Some guys might, enjoy that same tin 10 years, where the Latakia has toned down a little bit. Um, I made a video last week where dark fired for me was like that. I like bold, aggressive, dark fired Kentucky. So I don't mind if it's rounded out a little bit and the flavors meld over time, like 5 or 6 years. But I had a tin of old dark fired Kentucky that was 13 years old, and for me, it was just too mellow. It did mellow. It still tasted really, really nice in terms of its richness and its sweetness. There was more sweetness that came out in it, but that aggressiveness and that edge to the dark fired Kentucky was gone. So um, I wasn't a fan of that. So one of the reasons you age your tobacco is to get those tastes and to save some money down the road. But um, you date it also to make sure that if it goes past a certain age, you want to make sure you start to smoke it. So that's all going to depend on your own flavor profile. And I'll also say that maybe, I don't know if it's true in Europe, in the UK. It's true here in Canada. Um, Legally, you're only allowed to have so much tobacco on your own person. So I think in the States you can probably have 1,000 pounds, it doesn't matter. But Australia, New Zealand, I'm sure they're very similar to Canada in terms of a lot of their tobacco laws. UK is very similar too. You can only have a certain amount of tobacco on your possession at one time. Highly unlikely anyone's gonna like bulldoze your front door down and then take an inventory of your tobacco. But for that reason, you know, um, sell your tobacco, have fun with it, smoke it, but I wouldn't necessarily, you know, unless you live in the United States, I wouldn't necessarily be sharing your cellar, um, picture-wise or video-wise. You never know. So, last thing I'll say, ultimately do what works for you, right? These are all just recommendations I've seen over the years, some best practices, but do what works for you, right? At the end of the day, that's what matters. Um, so hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you got something out of it. Hope you learned something new. I know there's a lot of these videos, but I wanted to add my 2 cents. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Prairie Piper out.